Child exploitation is a deeply concerning and pervasive issue that affects millions of children worldwide. It involves the abuse and mistreatment of children for various purposes, including child labor, child trafficking, child marriage, sexual exploitation, and recruitment into armed groups. Child exploitation violates the rights and well-being of children, leaving them vulnerable and traumatized. Here are 10 examples of child exploitation in the world. 1. Child labor. Child labor is the use of children in work that is harmful to their physical, mental, and emotional development. It deprives children of their right to education and exposes them to hazardous conditions and exploitation. Example: in many countries, children work in hazardous industries such as mining, agriculture, and manufacturing, enduring long hours and dangerous conditions. 2. Child trafficking. Child trafficking involves the recruitment, transportation, and exploitation of children for forced labor, sexual exploitation, or other forms of abuse. Children are often lured with false promises and then trapped in situations of exploitation. Example: child trafficking networks operate globally, trafficking children across borders for various purposes, including forced begging, domestic servitude, and commercial sexual exploitation. 3. Commercial sexual exploitation of children, CSEC. CSEC refers to the use of children in the sex trade for financial gain. It includes activities such as child prostitution, pornography, and online exploitation. Example: in some parts of the world, children are sold into the sex trade or groomed online and exploited by traffickers and predators. 4. Child marriage. Child marriage involves the marriage of children, typically girls, before the age of 18. It often perpetuates cycles of poverty, limits education, and exposes young girls to physical and emotional abuse. Example: in some countries, child marriage is still prevalent, leading to early pregnancies, limited life choices, and health risks for young girls. 5. Child soldiers. Child soldiers are children, typically under 18, who are recruited or forced to serve in armed groups as combatants, spies, or laborers. They endure physical and psychological harm and are often used as pawns in armed conflicts. Example: various armed groups, including terrorist organizations and rebel factions, have recruited child soldiers in conflicts worldwide. 6. Online exploitation. The Internet has facilitated the proliferation of child exploitation material and online grooming of children for sexual purposes. Online platforms can also be used for child trafficking and sexual exploitation. Example: child exploitation networks have been exposed on the dark web, where child pornography is bought and sold. 7. Child labor in supply chains. Children are often exploited in global supply chains, working in factories and plantations to produce goods for consumers in developed countries. Example: child labor has been documented in the production of garments, electronics, cocoa, and other products, raising concerns about ethical consumption. 8. Child begging. Child begging involves children being forced or coerced into begging on the streets, often as part of organized networks. Example: child begging is prevalent in urban centers in some regions, and children are often subject to abuse and exploitation by handlers. 9. Child domestic servitude. Child domestic servitude involves children working as domestic helpers in private homes, subjected to long hours, low pay, and various forms of abuse. Example: children, especially girls, are vulnerable to domestic servitude, particularly in households that lack adequate labor regulations and oversight. 10. Child exploitation during disasters. Natural disasters and humanitarian crises can exacerbate child exploitation, as children become more vulnerable to trafficking, forced labor, and sexual exploitation. Example: in the aftermath of disasters, children in refugee camps and displaced communities are at heightened risk of exploitation. Addressing child exploitation requires a comprehensive and multifaceted approach. This includes strengthening laws and law enforcement to combat child exploitation and hold perpetrators accountable, investing in education and awareness campaigns to prevent child exploitation and raise awareness about its consequences, improving access to social services and support for vulnerable children to reduce their susceptibility to exploitation, providing rehabilitation and reintegration programs for children who have experienced exploitation, enhancing international cooperation and coordination to combat cross-border child trafficking and exploitation, encouraging responsible business practices, including monitoring supply chains to prevent child labor, promoting community-based child protection initiatives that empower local communities to safeguard children's rights. It is essential for governments, civil society, and the international community to work together to protect children from exploitation, promote their rights, and create a safe and nurturing environment for their growth and development.